This is the Celtic Soul podcast. I'm Andrew Milne, and on this episode of the podcast, I will be chatting to JOANNA Byrne. JOANNA is a Sinn Féin councillor who is standing in the general elections next week in Louth. She's also the chairperson of FAI Cup winners and promotion, I suppose, playoff winners, Drogheda United. Great time for the Drogs fans, and JOANNA is also a big Celtic fan and has travelled on many boats, buses, and flights over to see Celtic in Glasgow and further afield. So looking forward to that chat with JOANNA. Big shout out, folks, to all our patrons who have signed up again to support us this season, and indeed all the Celtic supporters clubs who I will get to mention in future issues. But I just want to thank Mick Hillman, Adrian Hillman, Desi Judge, Pascal and Kieran Flynn, Paul Murphy, Eugene Kavanagh, and Frank and Noel Trundle, and Tony Ratton over in Sunderland. Thanks, folks. Appreciate the support. If you would like to sponsor an episode of the podcast or indeed the fanzine, you can contact us via our website, on social media, or you can email us at info@celticfanzine.com. You'll get us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. The international break is over. It's been a mixed bag. If you're a Scotland fan, you'll be a happy fan. If you're an Ireland fan, not so happy. We had a mixed bag. We had a good night in the Aviva. A few points. Great to see the boys that I go to the international football with again. We rode a luck for a while. Scalesy played the full 90. Former Celtic, Mikey Johnson. He gave, the ball he gave in for the goal was brilliant. Evan Ferguson scoring the goal, but he done some great work in the build-up play. But I suppose the start of the night was Caoimhín Quayle, the Liverpool keeper, and it makes some difference to be playing first-team football, because the difference is there for all to see with Follow Ireland. And long may it continue. He saved the penalty. But then we had a nightmare in London, in Wembley, on Sunday. After a great start, a great defensive first half, Skersy got sent off and they scored a penalty, and then the floodgates opened. And, as an Irishman, we never like to lose to England in anything. So yeah, disappointing night. But all eyes now are on domestic football and a strange kick-off time of 7:45 on Saturday night. The game is live on television because it's almost impossible to get a ticket for this one. Very small allocation, and Celtic fans who have a brief in their pocket will be delighted, and they'll be very vocal on Saturday night in Tynecastle. It's always a tasty affair. But then, if we do the business domestically, we look towards Club Brugge, Celtic Park, under the lights, and another great night of paradise we all hope for. Our Champions League record is good so far. 2 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. And probably one of our best performances under Brendan Rodgers against RB Leipzig. So we'll be looking for more of the same. And excitement is building now that the club football is back. It's a great time at the moment to be yourself. Everyone's buzzing. With the cup final to look forward to as well. Against the Rangers. So yeah, plenty to look forward to. Folks, we're fan funded here at the podcast and the fanzine, and we offer free content across all our platforms. We don't have a Patreon, and we don't go behind the paywall. And if you'd like to support us, you can visit the website celticfanzine.com, where you'll find all our news, blogs, information on upcoming events, and also our online shop where you can support us by buying the fanzine, a t-shirt or a bit of merch, and you can also subscribe to the fanzine and you'll never miss a copy. That's for both the print and the digital. Yeah, and thanks everyone who tuned in last week for my conversation with Paul Sheridan from the Wakes. Great to catch up with Paul. And interesting to hear his take on the fallout between Celtic and St. Pauli. We also spoke about Shane McGowan as we come up to the anniversary. Excuse me. We also spoke about Shane McGowan as we come up to the anniversary of his death, his first year anniversary. Paul came over to us last year and played a solo gig here in Drogheda, and he's back in the Purple Room on February the 1st. It's a Saturday night, so put that in the diary, folks. As Paul does Shane MacGowan's songbook again. Absolutely brilliant. The band, The Wakes, the full band play King Tut's in Glasgow on December the 30th, and that's all a gig we're also looking forward to. And of course, Paul chatted all things Celtic and Glasgow with us on the podcast last week. So if you haven't heard that, give it a listen. You won't be disappointed. It's busy, busy, busy here now after the international break. We've just started work on issue 135 of the Fanzine, and that should be out within the next 2 weeks. We'll put up a pre-order for the print copy. As soon as we get the cover designed, as soon as Richie designs the cover for us, we'll get that up. The last issue 134 of More Than 90 Minutes, still available. We have still some print copies, which is unusual, on our online shop, and you can also download the digital issue straight into your inbox. And that's again celticfanzine.com. Upcoming events, we mentioned Paul there in the Purple Room on February the 1st. We have another couple of events we will be announcing in the next couple of weeks. And we also have the big one in Bangkok and Hua Hin in Thailand in March, when we go for part 3 of a little festival. A special guest will be Didier Gat. And I'm looking forward to chatting to Didier in the build-up as we preview the Glasgow Derby, which we will be watching in Bangkok. And the game will also be on in Hua Hin for those who are going straight to Hua Hin. We're looking forward to meeting Celtic fans from all over the world, which are congregating in Asia for this one. It's going to be a great 10 days or so. And first weekend takes place in Bangkok, and then it's on to Hua Hin. And we've lots of stuff planned. And we will have all the information and the tickets on sale by the end of the month. So plenty to look forward to, folks. But without further ado, she's a general election to look forward to. She's celebrating the Drogs, and she has a soft spot for someone we all know well. So without further ado, let's welcome Joanna to the podcast. Joanna Byrne, you're very welcome to the Celtic Soul podcast. You're a busy
Thanks.
woman. How
I
the
am
hell are you?
indeed. Yeah, I'm great. Not a bother. Thanks a million for having me. It's great to be here today.
And you're proudly wearing the Drogs colours there.
Oh, always, always. If
It's
I'm not
it,
wearing them this week, there's something wrong anyway. But no, you usually find me in them anyway, most days.
No, we will get into the Drogs later because it's been a brilliant week for them. But you have an election to win as well, and also, but as is a Celtic Soul podcast, we want to get a bit on everything about Joanna, including Celtic, who I've often brought you to the airport with me many years ago. I picked you up and brought you when you were a
You have
young
indeed.
girl, cutting your teeth in Glasgow. Joanna, general election coming up. A fantastic time as a Drogheda United fan. But before we talk about politics and our local team, Shamrock Rovers fan Jason Maloney was on the podcast a couple of years ago. Massive Rovers fan, but I met Jason through Celtic. He describes being married to Shamrock Rovers, but his mistress is Celtic. Does that sound familiar to you, or is that kind of your take on your football teams?
Well, look, I suppose I'm very unique, and I know Jason well. He's a great football man all around Scotland and Ireland, and indeed I know him through Shamrock Rovers as well as Celtic. But I'm probably a little bit different. I probably credit Celtic to where I am and in everything I'm doing at the moment. As you know, started traveling to Celtic with you guys many moons ago. As a young lassie, and spent many years doing the 3 o'clock in the morning start for a long day to the boat and sailing over and on a bus and the whole day in Glasgow and then the long journey home. And through my time following Celtic, I suppose I met great friends, football friends, and indeed political colleagues, if I'm being honest with you. And that's probably what sparked my interest in joining Sinn Féin and getting involved more in activism, was seeing the passion that I found in Scotland, that I found in friends who were travelling. There was just this raw passion about Celtic fans that really inspired me. And I got more and more into the football. And as the years went on, I joined my local Sinn Féin Cumann. Um, kept on my travelling with Celtic. I was obviously always involved in Drogheda United, but got involved in a Republican flute band that I had seen through my Celtic trips and the circles I was in that way. And that probably threw me more into the political side of my life, if I'm being honest with you. And everything just kind of spiraled from that. And all of a sudden, one day I'm a Sinn Féin activist. The next day I'm campaigning for a general election in 2016 to get the first female TD elected in Louth in Imelda Munster, which we did. And within a whirlwind of a couple of days, I'm sitting on a council seat after being co-opted onto a Imelda seat in the council. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've 8 years on the council. Moving into my first general election next week after winning two local elections off my own bat since my co-option. And I do credit Celtic, being honest with you, with a lot of where I started. I've probably evolved more in the Drogheda United role, which is something I never planned either, if I'm being honest, which has probably just been so heavily involved. It was a natural progression. And in recent years, I joined the board just probably a month or two before COVID, that January, the end of that January before COVID, I joined the board. And within 2 years, I was in the role as chairperson. And that's been another roller coaster, if I'm being honest with you. The first female League of Ireland chairperson in the country, the first female chairperson to lift an FAI Cup last week. So to me, it all came hand in hand. Celtic, Drogheda United, politics, all of it just kind of were different branches of the same tree for me, and 100% get where Jason's coming from with them comments. Been married to one and having a mistress. Unfortunately, I'm married to one and I've a couple of mistresses going out each direction in any which way they're going. But life is great. It's very busy, but everything I'm involved in is things that I love, that motivate me, and I'm passionate about evolving even further over the next while.
Yeah, Joanna, you mentioned Imelda there. Imelda's from the same council estate as I am, and it was
Yeah,
a proud moment. No matter what party she would have been standing for, when not only someone from the local your local estate gets elected to the Dáil, but also that it's a woman. Because when I was growing up, I was always very interested in politics, and it was, I suppose, yes, Celtic, but my politics came from music, from the music I was listening to, and certainly shaped my views and my life, and maybe that's why I'm so argumentative with politicians, including yourself. We've had a few conversations, but it was a proud moment because, again, when I was growing up, it was male dominated.
yeah,
Um, it was it was dominated. Back then, Fianna Fáil was the big party in the town. Fine Gael had a smaller percentage of the vote. Sinn Féin not so much. I remember the old stalwarts, Huey and knocking doors, and it wasn't so popular to knock doors when the
yeah.
conflict was on in the north, which seems to be used as a stick by the mainstream media to be Sinn Féin. Which is unfortunate, but it's always been part. Those parties have been part of the establishment for 100 years or more. So it is. But the people do vote, and the people have voted to keep them in for whatever reason. They wouldn't be for me, but they have, and even as Sinn Féin, as the biggest party in the last elections, it's constantly an uphill battle for anyone who doesn't vote to the right. Because
Mhm.
you see a party getting the biggest vote in the country, not being able to form a government, and then two parties who have been at loggerheads since the Civil War saying we need to keep Sinn Féin out. We need to keep the left out. We need to keep an alternative out. We need to keep in control of everything we do. So you know, how does Joanna convince people now to come out? Because there's three Sinn Féin candidates running in Loud, and I suppose uh, it's Sinn Féin have two seats. There's been a huge vote built up in both Drogheda and in County Loud. So with a third seat now, how does Joanna get people out there to change minds and continue this push for a change?
Look, there's two prongs in this, and I agree with everything you've said there. There's one side of it where we're knocking doors, and we've knocked thousands and thousands of doors over the last couple of months. We've effectively been on the doors since the back of the local election in June. It's just natural progression. We were out and about, we were active, and all of a sudden there's a general election coming into the mix. So it feels like we've been on the door every day, probably for most of this year. But the one common denominator on most doors, and even people who aren't Sinn Féin voters or Sinn Féin supporters, people are frustrated. Everybody is feeling the pinch in some way, shape, or form, whether it's their children still living in their box rooms, whether it's their children having to leave the countries because there's no hope of them being able to own a home of their own, whether it's they're fighting for medical appointments for children, whether they're fighting for mental health services. It doesn't matter whether they're struggling to pay their heating or tax their car, or everybody is frustrated. Everybody is affected at the moment. And I've been involved in a lot of election campaigns, both local, both general, European referendums. I am an activist more than I am anything else. And I'm really seeing this frustration on the door at the moment. So I think there's a natural sense that people are fed up. And what we're offering to people at the moment when we're knocking doors is you've got a clear choice here. It's another 100 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And as much as they'll tell you they're not two slices of the same loaf, they effectively are. And if you look at their general election manifestos, and my party leader made a great comment the other night in one of the debates, their manifestos is effectively everything they've failed to do when they've had the opportunity to do it. And I think people can see that clearly. From a personal perspective, I'm a local girl. I'm born and bred in Drogheda. I'm involved in the community. As we've mentioned, I'm heavily involved in Drogheda United. I was 22 years in the local brass band, the Lord's Brass Band. I was on the board of the Arts Centre for many years. There's a million things that I've been involved in over the years that are rooted right in the heart of our community, and contribute to positive change and positive elements for the people that I live among. So I think there's a personal recognition for me, in regards that I'm local, I'm active, but there's also a personal recognition that I'm a hard worker. I'm 8 years on the council, and for them 8.5 years, I've been at the forefront of everything. I've been standing with the retained firefighters when they needed it. I've stood with the LGBTQ community when nobody else did. Been honest with you, I'm open to all of their Pride festivals in Drogheda for the past 8 years. I've stood in solidarity with Palestine. I've been doing that long before the conflict, which started last October, ever since I joined the party. I've stood against drugs and crime. I fought for more policing, and I think my reputation in regards to my work on housing, which is my big passion, being an urban councillor, housing is the biggest issue that has always landed on my doorstep from day one. And I think my reputation and my voice on that is widely known around Drogheda and indeed County Louth. So there's two prongs of it. There's one where people are fed up and they see a clear choice between more of the same from Tweedledum, Tweedledee, or an alternative. And the only viable alternative that's out there at the moment is a government led by Sinn Féin. And then there is the personal vote. So what I'm hoping is that both of these come together, and people see that Sinn Féin are offering a real alternative. We want to lead a government without Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. We've been very, very clear on that. We're running a huge amount of candidates right around the country. You've mentioned we've added a third to the ticket here in Louth. And that is so we can credibly say to people when we're knocking doors that we're ready for this. We're taking it serious. We're running enough candidates. We won't get caught out like we did the last time. And if the people come out to support us this time, similar to they did in 2020, we will have the numbers to lead a new government.
Joanna, young people seem to be drawn towards Sinn Féin to vote. I have a son in his mid-20s, living at home, good job, plenty of money in his pocket. Still looked after by mommy and daddy. But, his option is to follow all his friends and emigrate.
Yeah.
Because even though he has a good job, there's just no way he could afford to buy a house.
Yeah.
But there's no way if he bought a house that he could afford to have a life.
Yeah. And look, I have a personal experience in that. I've a brother, he's just gone 30. He emigrated to Australia just short of 2 years ago, between Christmas and New Year. 2 years ago, it's coming on 2 years this Christmas. And that broke my heart, being honest with you. And the poor devil, he was trying to go for a couple of years beforehand. And probably been selfish in my own way. I always kind of reminded him, what if anything happens, Granny? What if anything happens, Mum? And you're the other side of the world. And I was really just trying to resonate with him how far away he would be. But in the end, I had to concede. I had to wish him well. He was going, himself and his girlfriend were going. And like that, they were going due to the same frustrations, as you mentioned with your own son. Aaron was living at home with Mum. Sophie was living at home with her parents. They couldn't afford to rent. Between them, one of them is a solicitor, the other one is a horticulturist. They damn good jobs. But if they had a rented, they were paying extortionate money on rent. They never would have had a life in any other way, shape, or form. They wouldn't have been able to travel. They couldn't afford to put their cars on the road. And they also wanted to try and save to buy a house. And they just couldn't do that in Ireland. And I had to accept that. It was a very hard pill for me to swallow. It's still very hard having them the other side of the world. But thankfully, they're living together, they're saving, they're working hard. They're happy, they're safe. That's the main thing. We've got into a little routine of when we can manage video calls with the nieces and the nephews and with my granny and stuff like that. And he was home last year and Mum was out there for a month, a couple of months ago. But it's very, very hard. And I really hold government responsible for that I lost my brother to the far side of the world. And touch wood, he gets home to us in a couple of years when he's ready to come home and he's a few pounds in his back pocket and he thinks he can set up life here. But it's a tough pill to swallow. So I hear you and I feel you. And in relation to housing, like, I bought my first home 2 years ago in Pierce Park, where you're from yourself. And I struggled. I lived in a shed out my mother's back garden for 7 years before that, trying to save for my deposit. And I had two jobs, like other people. I had a good income coming in. Stopped traveling as much as I was to Glasgow and to Celtic, and I cut out all the designer handbags and all of that kind of stuff for a few years. And it was a hard, hard slog. And worse still, when I eventually went sale agreed on my house, I spent 11 months waiting for my keys because the person who was selling the house to me was buying a brand new house, herself and her husband, and there was delays on the site. And over that 11 months, I saw houses around it selling for 10 grand more than what I went sale agreed, 15 grand more than what I went sale agreed. Eventually, there was one three doors up from where I'd gone sale agreed, sold for 22 grand more than what I had been sale agreed on my house. And I was afraid of my life that she was going to pull out of the sale and put the house back in the market within a few months. She would have got an extra 20, 25, perhaps 30 grand for the house that I wouldn't have been able to meet because I was at the top of where I could go. And that was me begging and borrowing and really pulling in everything I could to get to reach that milestone. But the stars aligned for me, and I don't know if it was my dad or who was looking down on me from above, but thankfully that lady stuck with me and she honoured the agreement we had made, and 11 months later I got the keys on my house. And it was a huge achievement for me as a single person going out and buying a house on my own, but I was very, very lucky. And I really believe it was just luck that things aligned for me, because I look at people around me, people with similar incomes, perhaps earning more, and just where the market has gone, even in that short period of time, they can't make that. They can't meet that milestone. And that's really why I'm so passionate in Sinn Féin's policies. Like Owen O'Brien, our spokesperson on housing, we're the only party who has launched a 5-year plan to called a Home of Your Own, and it outlines how we would invest in social housing, how we'd invest in affordable housing and affordable rental, and the measures that we would make and implement to really and truly give young people a chance of owning a home of their own and having a life while doing so. And I'm so, so passionate. And anybody who hasn't read our housing policy, please go onto the Sinn Féin website and read it. Inform yourself of what we are offering before we actually go out and vote next Friday, because we're the only realistic, progressive alternative to the government out there, and the government have failed us. Simple as.
Yeah, Joanna, you mentioned rent prices. Like, that's nothing new. When I go back, I moved out of home at 21. Um, I just wanted independence. I think it's very important for young people to get independence. You need to, you need to fly the nest. But I soon realized while renting how expensive it was compared to buying back then. So we were able to save up a deposit between two of us. I think it was 10% and buy a house because houses were affordable then. We didn't have great jobs at the time. We didn't have great incomes, but by putting it together, we were able to buy a house. That house was probably about punt at the time cheaper a month to buy than to rent. And
Wow.
people are still, even if they could afford to buy, even if they can afford to rent is more expensive than buying,
Yeah.
in certain parts of the country. And other people, I always remember, people having to move from Dublin to Cavan or to Monaghan to be able to afford a house. And now they can't even do that. Like, it just seems, and then that meant that the roads were full, you know,
Yeah.
people would like if you're living 2 hours from from your home and you have to drive in and out to work, you know that has to eat into your family life as well. And the whole housing crisis is there's a huge knock on effect, be it emigration, be it family time, and it is so sad. I remember, when my dad was in London, and when things picked up in Ireland, he came home and he had the opportunity then when Ballsgrove was built, to rent the council house and then buy it. And he's still, he's 89 tomorrow as we record this, and he's still in that house with my mum. And they don't have to, because they have a base and they had a base to bring up their kids. They like long term they don't have they don't they get their pension off the government, but they never were in financial dire straits.
Yeah.
You know,
And there's not too many that can say that out there at the moment. I think it's the number one, certainly from my experience. And as I say, I'm an urban councillor, so I'm in an urban environment where people are looking to live, so it's the biggest issue that has always hit my doorstep is housing, and it really the strain it puts on people's mental health, their well-being. There's people who'd often message me at 3 o'clock in the morning, at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's the last thing they're thinking about before they go to bed. It's the first thing they're thinking about when they get up in the morning is, will they still have a roof over their head? Or how can they get a roof over their head? Or how can they provide a roof over their children's heads? Worse still. And it's a massive issue, and it's a huge factor in this election, I think, because every doorstep we're going to, people want to talk about housing, and it's elderly people as well, like your parents in their 80s, and they're concerned for their grandchildren, they're concerned for their neighbours. It's right across the board. It's not just people thinking about themselves. They're looking at our young people flocking in their droves.
yeah, yeah, it's hard, and I'm not. I don't want to make I'm not a member of Sinn Féin or any political party. But anyone that knows me knows that my politics is to the left. Um, but Joanna, like, Owen, in my opinion, is one of the best politicians in the Dáil. So for him to be in charge of housing, I trust him.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
trust
I
Owen.
do. I do as well. And I've worked quite closely with Owen in years, and I've watched him very closely over recent years. I actually think he'll go down in the history books as a change maker. And that's whether we get into government or we don't. Like, he's published 2 books on housing. He's so astute and he just carries such an expertise in his field because it's his passion, and he's researched, he's studied, he's met with people who's researched, he's met with people who can outline the economics as to how we make housing better. He's invested his time in it, and I really, really think he's across his brief. And regardless of whether he gets the opportunity to be the next housing minister, which I hope he does, he will still continue to work in that field and still continue to contribute. And hopefully someday somebody listens and somebody enacts the change that's needed to give everybody, whether it's you, whether it's me, whether it's our relatives, just that chance to be able to live safely and securely without that worry of losing your home.
Yeah, Joanna. What I'm in Bosgrove. I'll go back. I'll swing back to Drogheda United. I'll take you back to Drogheda United. Um, Dusty Flanagan lived in a house across the road from me.
That's right. Yeah.
Dusty was a hero growing up. Dusty was Drogheda United centre half. He would play in all the League of Ireland selections when English teams would come over. I remember him marking Tony Cotty for Everton, and he had a brilliant game that day. But Dusty's eyesight wasn't great, and people thought he was a very dirty player, but he wasn't. It was just he couldn't see, which makes his incredible how good he was. He was over with
Yeah.
Bolton on trials. Could have went to England, but homesick. But when I think back of the I've had a roller coaster ride with Celtic, especially in the 90s when they were so poor. and Rangers were winning everything. But Drogheda has been a roller coaster, and I go back before your time, Joanna. Like I remember, you know, local heroes as well, Gel Martin and
Yeah.
Tottenham coming to play us in the UEFA Cup. Now hammering us home and away, but to be playing in Europe, Drogheda United to be in Europe,
It's
and
funny you mentioned that. Like my grandfather was actually the chairman at the time and brought us to Europe to play Tottenham. You know, he was the first chairman of Drogheda United to ever bring us to Europe. I mean, you know, history has repeated
yeah,
itself. Here we are so many years later, 41 years later, and his granddaughter is bringing us back to Europe again. Like it's crazy how it swings and roundabouts, you know.
unbelievable. Yeah, and I meant to mention Mick earlier when your grandfather, because there is the family are steeped in Drogheda United history. And I look back at them times and they were great. I remember Minnie Mountain, another Bosgrove
Yeah,
man, scoring a cracker against English goalkeeper Peter Shilton, one of the
yeah,
greats. And what a goal he scored! I think Minnie came off the bench that day.
he
That was
did. Yeah.
Shilton was with Southampton. And then I remember the 90s. I remember standing in United Park, freezing cold, getting hammered by cold ramblers, sitting at the bottom of the first division. And then the Doolan years, all the success that brought. Setanta Cups, FAI Cups, leagues, I like when I think back, Jackie Curran telling me, a lot of mention Jackie, I'll die happy now when Drogheda won the league. And it does bring a great feel fact good, there's a feel good factor in the town now once again. What a week.
Yeah.
FAI Cup winners and winning the promotion and the relegation playoffs. And it's a new breed. I seen Nathan and the boys from the Ultras, saying, dreams do come true, and they're living now what, other Drogheda fans have lived in the past. And
Yeah.
it's great to see because, it's not so long ago there was buckets outside every shop in Drogheda collecting money to save Drogheda. So it's great to see that there's progression of the club. And what people don't think, local businesses maybe who don't back Drogheda United maybe should, because the revenue it brings into the town when there's success.
Yeah.
Be it pubs, restaurants, bus companies. There's so much, can be done with these, back in the community. And not only Drogheda, like that goes for the GAA and other organisations.
Yeah, look, it's been I mean, we mentioned that word roller coaster a few times. The last 12 to 18 months has been a roller coaster for Drogheda United. And as you know, we went through a takeover this time last year, the 6th of November last year. So that's something that was in the build up probably for 12 to 18 months prior to that. But the immediate 9 months from January last year right up to November's 10 or 11 months was a very busy period for us as a board, and myself as chairperson and Conor Hoy, the previous chairperson, who actually stood down as chairman to go and focus on securing external investment for Drogheda United. It was a very, very busy period, and we were very conflicted at different times throughout that period as to what the future of Drogheda United might look like. We'd come to a realistic point of view that you can't make money in League of Ireland football, and I think that's evident even since then with some of the troubles other clubs are having. And how could we pave a way forward that would make it a long-term sustainable club that was self-sufficient, not making money, but having enough money to take over and to perhaps progress in playing budgets, stay in the Premier Division, focus on new facilities and all of this kind of stuff. And we were very realistic that we couldn't do it. The headaches we had every Tuesday and Wednesday as to how we were going to meet wages on a Thursday was becoming increasingly worse. And it was a whirlwind of a time, and we came to the realization that we needed external investment. So Connor, to be fair to him, put it out there and said, we're open to this. Anybody wants to talk to us, let's talk. We'd met a couple of potential, 3 or 4 potential investors, that for whatever reason they weren't the right fit. Some of them were more focused on how quick could we get to Europe and throwing the checkbook at it to see how quick we could get there. And that's not what we wanted. We've been there before. We've done the highs and the drop back down to reality where there's no money in the bottom fell out of the club. And that's not what we wanted for Drogheda United. We wanted to secure it for generations to come. So eventually, a group, Travella Group, was put in touch with Connor High through a mutual friend in Future Ticketing, and Connor went and met these guys and came back to me and said, Joanna, I found the partner. I was very skeptical, and I was like, right, here we go again. We'd met 3 or 4 people, and he said they're American, and I was straight away, my back was up, and I said, I don't know how I feel about this, and he said, right, well, they're flying in next Sunday, and we're going to spend a day with them, and we'll meet them. And I said, right, fair enough. So they flew in the following Sunday morning. I think it was 9 or 10 of them, investors with the Travella Group came in, the owner, the managing director of Travella, his senior staff, and they came in. We picked them up at the airport on a Sunday morning, brought them to Drogheda, and we initially started in the Chamber of Commerce building where Hubert Murphy had set up a whole backdrop of what Drogheda as a town and a city could look like, and the potential in Drogheda, and with right investment where it could go, and what the future might look like. So we spent about an hour or two there with them, and all getting to know each other. We introduced ourselves. It was the board of Drogheda United and the group from Travella. And within about 40 minutes, I had done a complete U-turn, and I'd actually text Connor across the room and said, I'm sold. And there was a couple of key things that brought me around as quick as I did. And it was their motivations and their morals, and what had got them to where they are to invest in football groups. And, Ben had spoke to us a bit about how he'd gone to Africa and done some pro bono work for a few years. And while he was there, kind of set up football camps for underprivileged kids to have something to do. Then he saw opportunities of how there might be pathways for disadvantaged children into Europe or onto the continent, perhaps through football programs, to offer them hope in their life. And there was all these words like hope and sustainable and steady and careful, and all of these things. These buzzwords were really hitting me, and there's something different about these guys. It's not about throwing money and 4 teams from Ireland every year are getting into Europe, and how quick can we do it, and then making money, and then we're gone for the hills. It was 10, 15, 20-year plans and all this kind of stuff. And that was great. We had a great day. We brought them to United Park, or Weavers Park as it is at present, showed them our home. It's home to us, be it what it may be, and as run down as it may be, it's home to us, it's home to me. And we showed them the new land that we'd earmarked with the council for development of a new stadium. And we spent the whole day with them. And by the time they left, I knew in the gut of my stomach that we had found the right partner for Drogheda United. So we spent several months. We went through a due diligence process. They went through their due diligence process. The FAI done their due diligence process. And eventually we came to a point last November where I presented a takeover option to the members, which was unanimously endorsed. And we moved into this season. We started this season with a small increase in our playing budget, and the focus was on facilities to come. And we said, we weren't going to go full time straight away. We were going to build up to that over a period of time. And the expectation and the ambition for us was to stay in the Premier Division. Here we are, we're in the Premier Division. We had a fantastic cup journey, and we lifted the FAI Cup, and the momentum around the club has been phenomenal. You spoke about businesses and support. I brought the team into several schools in the build up to the cup, the month between the semi-finals and the finals. We visited as many schools as we could, and every child in every school had a Drogheda United scarf or a jersey or everything. Every child knew the players. And we went to one school, and probably the one most local to myself and yourself, St. Patrick's in Butterbrewer. And the only way I could describe it, and I described it on the stage at our homecoming last week, was like Beatlemania. I walked in there with the team, and this place just bloody blew up. It was like Simon Cowell and One Direction and Westlife and whoever it may be the Beatles wouldn't have got this reception. It was unbloody believable. And I actually said to the principal of the school that day, I said, imagine what it'll be like when we come back with the cup in 2 weeks' time. And we've yet to get back out. We're going to bring the cup around the schools. But this was bedlam, right? And I was just like, wow, this is phenomenal. And at that stage, you could see businesses. I'd met with Love Drogheda Bids. I'd met with the council. The council are putting up claret and blue bunting along West Street. Love Drogheda Bids had messaged out to all the businesses in the town. Shop windows were flags, bunting. You're going around housing estates, and there's these welcome placards in the front of Hillview and the Highlands. The residents in here are supporting Drogheda United. It was just phenomenal. And all of a sudden, I'm like, this is a real bloody pinch me moment. Like we are bringing this joy to this town as a thank you for the support they have given us. And like you look at the ultras, they spent over 7 grand on their display in the Aviva. Have to mention Scotch Hall Shopping Centre. They've been fantastic. They gave me a unit upstairs and the old next unit for the ultras to go in every night for 3 weeks when the shopping centre was closed, where they had space and they were able to make their displays. And them lads have invested time, tears, money, to the detriment of their own families. They're all young men. A lot of them have young kids. Some of them are just recently married. One of them had a baby on the way in the middle of all of this. And they were morning, noon, and night trying to fly the Drogheda flag and represent Drogheda United and Drogheda as best they could. And by God did they do it. Like they had their moment to shine and they shone so brightly. I could not be prouder of them. Like they're great guys and like we dislag like I'm their Drogheda United mammy, and the one who has to pull them into line. I'm the one who gives them a hug when we do well and I'm in the middle of them as much as I can on match nights and always encouraging them. And they've done some phenomenal work. They've done a couple of things with me in the club on mental health. They've done a sleep out and raise money for Drogheda Women's Refuge. They've become so aware of the struggles in our society that they've grown as men as well as being great football fans. And I'm so proud of them. And that just shows you the potential, what's out there, what the club can do in the community and how the community can lift us as a club at the same time. Because see, when we walked out onto the Aviva, the pitch just before kick-off 2 weeks ago, and I looked around and I was with the ultras in the Aviva on the Saturday and I watched them setting up their display. We were there all day the Saturday morning. So I knew what the display was. I'd seen it, but that moment, like I was just, my body got stiff. I was choking back the tears and I was just like, wow, this is different gravy. This is brilliant stuff. And they're up there with the displays Celtic fans are doing. They're up there with some of the big clubs right across Europe, and they've just been phenomenal. The whole town, the momentum, everything is just brilliant, and it really is a very, very special time to be involved in Drogheda United. And my Celtic roots are probably coming back out in me when I was on the stage that night when we took the team home to Scotch Hall and we had our homecoming that night, and I was speaking to the people that came out to support us, and I was thanking everybody for their support. And inadvertently, I actually quoted one of my all-time heroes, Neil Lennon, and I actually said, "This isn't the end; it's just the beginning." And that's something that always stuck with me that Lenny said a few years ago. And there I was saying it to 6 to 8 thousand people that had come to welcome us home. It was just a very, very special moment, and it's a great time for the club. The future is really, really bright.
Yeah, and how things have changed towards the ultras. I remember when they first came on the scene, people didn't understand. Obviously, I'm steeped in football culture. More like to my magazine's called More Than 90 Minutes because it's all about the culture. It's all
Yeah,
about the charity elements, the away days, the fans. It's a lifestyle. And when the ultras come in, and this included old board members,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
say,
yeah.
were very critical of them.
They were, and I think again that's coming back to my time spent in Glasgow with Celtic. I get that. I was one of them fans marching up with the Green Brigade, going to, trying to jump in on that atmosphere and embrace that as much as I could. And I have a great relationship with the ultras. And don't get me wrong, there's times where I have to be the boss, and there's been one or two times this season I've had to be the boss, and the lads have respected that. To be fair to them, but
and that's great to have because there'll always be friction
yeah,
between fans and boards. So if you can smooth it out as much as possible, well done. But like everyone doesn't agree. Football fans are a broad church in clubs, and like I seen the work they do. I speak to them every Friday night after the games. They come in to cross to me,
yeah,
and I get the updates. I get the videos. So I kind of have an insight of what's coming down the road. Um, but also just to compliment them, I remember Mark Burke, who's Celtic stalwart, Nave Park, and a Shamrock Rovers fan, and he told me, this is a good few years ago. He said to me, the Drogheda Ultras are a credit to the team. He says they were a small group at the time. He says, but the noise and colour they brought to Tala, and that always, was in me
stuck
head
with you.
when Drogheda was going back to Tala last week, and
Yeah.
the Ultras are a bigger group now, and young people want to be part of it. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
just because when I was standing on the terraces, in cold weather, watching Drogheda, and they weren't great teams. Um, it was one man and his dog. There was not many people at them games, and it's great to see some of the people that stood on the terraces then are still going to the games. Which just goes to show that the loyalty they have for the team over through good times and bad times, and long may it continue. But Joanna, I went up to see Celtic playing Sligo. Downey, a very good friend of mine, lives in New York, but he comes home regularly to see Sligo and Celtic. I met him through Celtic. Downey is in Drogheda he always comes to Drogheda because, he comes to meet me and go to game, and then we'll have a few points in the cross after. So he invited me up for the match. I went up to stay with him. And he took me to the pubs, 100% behind Sligo Rovers. You know, memorabilia, pictures everywhere. And they had huge respect for the Glasgow connection as well, through William McStay and Sean Fallon and that. And sometimes I don't get that with League of Ireland clubs. There's a distaste towards Celtic from some of them. Some of them there's a huge connection, but some. And I went, you know what? This is anyone from any club could walk in here and be impressed with how
Yeah.
welcoming it was. Freezing cold night, packed stadium, sold out. A great game of football as well. But I was standing behind a lady and her husband, and they were chatting. And every Saturday night is their night out with their family, and it's to go to see Sligo. And I'm standing behind listening. I couldn't get a seat because we get in close to kickoff. And I went, this is great. So the next morning they took me and showed me the plans for the new stadium. Wow,
Mm.
so impressive. Joanna, they've got over 16 million of a grant towards that. And they're only going to grow, Sligo. They're big in the community, and as a Drogheda now, Drogheda have a position now of strength. But why did Drogheda not apply for grants?
Oh
Why
no, we did. We applied for the
why we
same.
get nothing?
We applied for the same large scale sports infrastructure fund that Sligo recently got awarded. Sligo, Bowes, I think, got 23.5 million as well. Um, Look, I suppose we got word the beginning of May that the large scale sports infrastructure fund was opening the beginning of June, and the application had to be in by the end of June. We were in the process of negotiating a land deal with Louth County Council, which we have completed. It's just ready for final sign off at this stage. But we saw the opportunity and we applied for the grant as well. We hired in a company who are experts in applying for these grants. We invested a huge amount of money, and I mean a huge amount of money into the grant, as did other clubs. And we put in the grant. We met with Minister Thomas Byrne several stages throughout this, but we had met with him a few months prior to this, and we've similar plans to Sligo, funny enough. We'd shown the minister our plans and for that whole northern environment of Drogheda, and how it could potentially come a sporting centre of excellence for everybody in the town, not just for Drogheda United. And we felt at every stage that the minister was supportive of us. We'd built a good relationship with him. I introduced him to Travella prior to the takeover, and at that stage kind of outlined our plans. So we applied for the grant. It was a key objective of the Drogheda implementation plan for a new Drogheda United Stadium, to be constructed and to be supported. So we met the implementation board, who actually supported our grant application and wrote a fantastic letter to Minister Thomas Byrne and to the Minister of Justice, who's responsible for the implementation plan, and asked them to stand over their commitments to prioritise any funding applications that come in line with the implementation plan. And we got the whole application off, and we were probably very confident that we would get something out of the grant. I'm very, very deflated when the announcement came out a couple of weeks ago that we didn't get anything. Now, the announcement came on a Monday morning. It kind of leaked on Twitter over the Sunday night. The Tuesday was a big day for us as a club, as we had the national press conference for the FAI Cup. We were hosting it in the new civic offices in Fair Street in Drogheda that Tuesday. And I was very conscious that all the national media and local media were going to be there that day. So we had a quick meeting with Minister Thomas Byrne that Tuesday morning, who told us there was a grading system from the FEI and there was a grading system from the council who co-sponsored our application. And unfortunately, the Daily Mount project was further along with us in planning. It was ready to go. Similar to Sligo, it was a little bit further on than us, and we were very early days in our project. There was only so much money in the pot, and they opted to go with the projects that were ready to move. We still had a bit of work to do, but he gave a clear commitment to us that our application was a viable, fundable application, which was key to me to hear them words. There was nothing wrong with the application. They believed in it, they believed in our plans, and that when funding becomes available, it will be funded. So that means we're top of the reserve list. So should any of these projects, not just football, but whether it's GAA, basketball, any of the sports projects that were awarded funding, should they not get off the ground and funding is returned to the department, we're next in line for funding. Or should another round of funding open up over the next year or so, we're next in line for funding. So that was reassuring to hear. But we went into that media day, and of course, the first questions were all to myself and to our executive director, Wesley Hill from Travella, who were at the top table, were all about the grant and us being denied funding and how did we feel about it. And I'd made a very conscious decision that that day was to be about the team, it was to be about the cup final, and it was to be about the fans who've been on this journey with us. And I wanted to keep it positive. I didn't want it to overshadow the event that was coming that Sunday. So we tried to keep the media day as positive as we could. And I was very clear that we'll control what's within our control. In the meantime, we'll go to planning, which we're moving on at the moment. We'll finalise the land deal with the council, which we're moving on at the moment. And when this funding becomes available, we will be ready to move. That's still my position at this minute. I'm still optimistic that our new stadium is very much to come in the near future. But I was very, very deflated, and I probably just put that to side and that media day to keep the positive momentum around the cup final and what it meant to the team, what it meant to the club, and what it meant to the town and city of Drogheda, and that was our priority. So we just need to keep working in the background. I'm confident the stadium will come. I think it will come very quickly within the next few years. Our plans are phenomenal. They haven't been released publicly yet because we haven't gone to planning. But yes, I believe that we will deliver a new stadium. We will deliver new training pitches to serve the people of the area. There's an option there for that whole area to be transformed and amenities that's badly needed in that area with all the houses that's gone up. So our amenities and our infrastructure that comes with the stadium will benefit the whole area. And I think it's a very, as I said earlier, this is just the beginning for Drogheda United, and that includes the stadium plans. I think it's a very exciting time for the club. I think it's a very necessary thing. I've spoke at length in media interviews over the last few months about how not having enough facilities is choking our involvement really in our academy and our women's football, which I'm particularly passionate about building even more so. And we just, until we get additional facilities, we're hamstrung by what we have. So it's a huge priority for the club, but I'm very confident that we will have something as spectacular as Sligo's of our very own here in Drogheda in the near future.
And I'm sure the town will, Joanna. You've spoken very passionately about it. I've seen false dawns on the stadium, so I do hope it goes ahead. It's much needed. And I'm of a vintage that remembers the Lord Stadium. So
So I back.
I remember the move to United Park
Yeah,
and how big a deal that was then.
yeah, yeah.
So hopefully we see a new stadium similar to maybe what Sligo are planning, because it'll only enrich the League of Ireland.
Oh, 100%.
The
And
facilities are better for fans.
it comes with any new stadium now has to meet certain UEFA guidelines. So a lot of the new stadiums will be very similar because they have to be a minimum category three UEFA standard to be able to host international matches, European matches. And look, we're going into Europe now next summer and we won't be able to play European football at home, which is really, really disappointing. But look, we'll do what we need to do. We've done it before. We'll take the crowds with us. And I think we've seen that when we went to the Aviva a couple of weeks ago. There's nearly 20,000 Drogheda fans came with us on that journey on that day. So look, it's a setback. Of course, it's a setback. And I would have loved for us to be able to announce that day, that we got 15 million or 18 million and it would have just really elevated the whole week that was in it with us going to the cup final that weekend. But look, we still went to the cup final. It didn't hold us back. We done the business. We brought the silverware home. We just need to harness that momentum that's around now and keep the stadium front and foremost of everything we're doing going forward. And we're up for that. I won't be letting that slip at all.
Well, that'll have to go on the back burner for the next week, Joanna, because you have an election to win. You know, for everybody listening, Joanna, just before I'm going to get you to climb into me Celtic Soul time machine before we finish, but just before we finish, give me a pitch. Why should I vote for Joanna Byrne?
Well, look, I think, anybody who speaks to me sees I'm very passionate about Drogheda. I see the untapped potential that Drogheda and indeed the County Aloud has to offer. I have a reputation of being a hard worker. I go out, I do my business. I'm the voice for those who need it. I'm the voice for our area. And one thing I will promise to anybody when I am elected, I will continue to be that voice just on a larger scale. I want to go national. I want to bring Drogheda. I want to bring Loud to the national table. And I will not be found wanting in pushing our agenda at every single opportunity, whether it's sporting facilities, whether it's housing, whether it's additional health facilities, whether it's mental health, whether it's education, whether it's childcare, you name it. I am out there to represent us on a national scale, and I have a great party behind me. Sinn Féin have the plans, we have the policies, we have a very, very strong team, and we intend to go into lead a new government, a progressive government, without Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and improve the lives of everybody that we represent.
So what you're telling me, Joanna, is change is needed.
Change is needed and change is coming, please God.
Okay, so all that's left is I ask all my guests, and you're not the first politician I've had on the podcast.
I actually don't see myself as a politician, to be honest with you. I find that so strange when people call me a politician. I just see myself as, whether it's football, I just see myself as a fan, whether it's my council work, I just see myself as an activist. I actually really hate being called a politician, to be honest with you. It's my bugbear. I just see myself as me, as a Drogheda girl, somebody who's passionate and somebody who has an opportunity to try and change things. That's the only way I see myself.
Well, you better get used to being called it. I think you're actually the first Irish politician, even though sometimes you don't class yourself as a politician, but you're in the game of politics, and politics can be a dirty game, both locally and nationally. Yeah. And like, as someone who lives in Drogheda, I know what you've put into the local area. You've knocked doors that maybe other parties wouldn't knock. Yeah. Just and that's fact. You'll go into areas that you may get abuse in.
Yeah.
And this is that's part of politics.
Yeah, it is for sure.
But I think I'm thinking back. I'm trying to think, did we have an Irish politician on? I don't think so. We've had Tommy Sheridan on, who was a former member of the Scottish Parliament.
Yeah.
And we've also had the Albanian president on.
That's right. Yeah, I see
that. So you're following on from some political footsteps. If you can speak, if you do get elected at all and you can speak like Tommy Sheridan, I tell you, people will listen. That was the only person I interviewed that he didn't need a microphone.
Yeah, he's class act.
Joanna, the Celtic Soul time machine, I get all the guests to climb in. So take me back to a Celtic moment, a Drogheda moment, and a political moment in your life.
Right. A Celtic moment, I'm going to take one that was actually off the pitch, and it was meeting Neil Lennon. I was going to do a meet and greet with Neil Lennon, which was organised through Hilly, through St. Margaret's Celtic Supporters Club. And I brought my jersey, which on the back of it, I had printed Mrs. Neil Lennon, which is what I wore to the matches the whole time. I idolised him. He is my all-time sporting hero. But he took this in good spirit and he signed my jersey and he wrote, I actually didn't see what he wrote, and I got him to turn it around and we got a lovely photograph of myself and him holding this jersey. But on the top of it, he had wrote, "See you at the altar, love, Neil." So that is my all-time favourite Celtics moment. And I still have it. It's framed, pride of place, and it's just world class, brilliant. My Drogheda one had to have been last Sunday when I got to lift the FAI Cup on the pitch in the Aviva in front of 20,000 Drogheda fans. I made history that day in so many ways, but being the first female chairperson to lift the FAI Cup in the League of Ireland. It was a huge moment for me, and that will the only way I'm going to top that, I think, is when I'm cutting the ribbon on the new stadium. That was a real pinch me moment and one I'll never forget. And in conjunction with that, bringing the team home to Drogheda and taking to the stage in Scotch Hall at the homecoming, and speaking and thanking everybody in Drogheda who had supported us in that journey is just, they're up there with moments I'll probably never feel again. They were brilliant. And then politics one, I'm hoping next Friday, when please God, I'm elected as a TD for Louth, the second female TD will be up there. But at the moment, I would say my proudest day was taking my seat on Louth County Council, 21st of March 2016. I felt very privileged and honoured to be afforded that opportunity. And it's something I've never took for granted. And I work hard every day to earn that place on that seat. And hopefully next week it's a new seat, but the same work, just on a bigger scale.
And I'm just going to make a few points, Joanna, on as you climb out of the time machine. Joanna, I've been told that you work very well with politicians from across the parties in the council. That's the reports I get back. And that's going to be needed if you are elected, because no one party has the strength or the power to form a government in Ireland. We have a very fragmented country. Many parties will be involved in negotiations to form the next government. You mentioned Neil Lennon, your all-time hero. When Drogheda United were down in the dumps and the bucket collections were out, and there's a lot of people in Drogheda have a problem with Celtic, because I've had arguments with them over many years, including some Drogheda fans who booed Henrik Larsson when we played Helsingborg, disgracefully. And a lot of people, and because in Europe, the League of Ireland is a family, and many supporters from other teams support the League of Ireland when they're in Europe, because and that's just the way it is. You will root for a League of Ireland team, even if they're your rivals. But when it comes to Europe, you will deep down you will root for them. Neil Lennon he was a reserve team manager of Celtic at the time. He brought over a team to play Celtic or to play Drogheda on a very cold winter's night. Scott Brown, a Celtic legend, was coming back from injury. I think James Forrest played that night. The big American keeper played that night, and we ended up in the Boyne Valley Hotel after with a couple of drinks. Michael O'Neill was there. The Shamrock Rovers manager as well. Now the Northern Ireland manager, and we had a great chat about obviously the League of Ireland, because Michael was Rovers managing them. Give me great insight into someone coming in from the outside that night. So fair play to Neil Lennon for that, for helping to save Drogheda and keep them going. But I also remember going to a packed United Park for a Celtic selection against Drogheda many years ago. Charlie Nicholas was on the cover of the programme, and I'm not sure if he played that night. Packy Bonner, I know, was in nets that night. And the town was packed all day with Celtic fans and Drogheda fans drinking. And it was a beautiful day. There was an awful lot of drinking outside, and it was a great day. So maybe someday, Joanna, when the ribbon's cut, we might see a Celtic selection coming back to play Drogheda United.
Absolutely. We'd have to have Neil Lennon front and centre of that now, I think.
You
Might be
never
a bit
know.
biased.
You never know what's down the line. Joanna, I want to wish the best of luck in the elections.
A million.
I want to wish the best of luck with Drogheda United and the new stadium.
Yes.
And I'm sure I will see you
Absolutely.
at some stage, because we're not too far away from each other. So, Joanna, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on to the Celtic Soul podcast.
Thanks a million. Loved every minute of it. Best of luck.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for taking time to chat to us. I know you are very busy with the election and indeed the drugs. I don't know how you find the time to do everything. If you enjoyed the podcast, folks, and can I give you a couple of recommendations for similar podcasts? One definitely won't listen to is with Jason Maloney. Jason, a Shamrock Rovers fan. That was a great conversation back a couple of years ago with Jason. We also had former member of the Scottish Parliament, Tommy Sheridan, on with us on more than one occasion, I think. So you can check them out as well. And we spoke to the president of Albania, Ilya Meta, about his love for Celtic. So, folks, they're all across any podcast platform. You'll get them on Celtic Fanzine TV or on our YouTube channel. And also, if you have difficulty finding any of the podcasts, you'll get them on the website, celticfanzine.com, and just click into podcasts, and they're all there, or CFC TV, all the videos are there. Yeah. And, folks, just thanks for listening. It means so much. It's great to have the podcast back. It's great to have the conversation going again. Just really, really humbled at times with some of the comments that come in and the private messages. So thanks very much. But it's, this comes out on a Friday night and you'll be getting ready for the weekend. Whatever you're doing, have a great weekend. The Celtic fans will be travelling in small numbers due to tickets to Edinburgh for the Hearts game. But if you're local, you can catch me in the Cross on my usual Friday night for the tunes. And I'll also be in the Arbles on Saturday night after the Celtic game. So looking forward to that. No doubt I'll bump into some of you on Wednesday night in and around Celtic Park or in the city beforehand. Really looking forward to both games, both the Hearts game and the Champions League game against Bruges. And don't forget, folks, if you're based in Ireland, if you have a vote, get out and use it. And from a personal point of view, I hope we see a bit of change in this country, because we've plenty of money and maybe we should be spending it where it needs to be spent. So, folks, that's I don't want to make a political broadcast, but get out and get voting. Come on, let's make it. Let's make a change. It's right. I'm going to stop now. Folks. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the football if you're going. And we'll talk to you next week. And the podcast should be out next week on Election Day. So we'll have another guest. So looking forward to chatting to them and chatting to plenty of guests for future issues. Hail, hail.